Hi, my name's Abby Clark. I'm part of the administrative team at Kaskaskia Special Education District based in Centralia, Illinois. We serve students in Clinton, Marion, and Washington counties. And today you're going to discuss the concept of transition planning committees and why it's important to form a village to help our students transition from school to adult services. Our session today will focus on the importance of transition planning committees, also known as TPCs. We're going to discuss the initial steps in forming a committee, including the participants and the stakeholders that might best serve the students in your area and the gaps in services. Finally, we're going to look at goals and projects, both short-term and long-term, that either a newly formed TPC or one that maybe needs to be reinvigorated or revitalized can undertake. I'm hearing a lot at this time in the year that people are finding that the older TPCs that have been around for a while are struggling with membership and keeping people active. So I feel like it's important that we talk about the goals and the projects that our newly formed TPC is taking, because I think some of those skills could also apply to some of the ones that are in need of some revitalization. In exploring the needs of our cooperative area, I noticed quickly that the Transition Planning Committee, or a TPC, would be a really excellent way to fill some gaps in services that I'm discovering and that our students were in need of. Looking at our Indicator 14 outcomes across our co-op, I would see that the data was falling far short of where we would like to see our students performing after they leave us. Many places had minimal or no work-based learning opportunities, and community experiences and engagement were significantly limited. We are in a rural area with a lot of poverty, which may play into part of that, which makes it even more important for the districts and the schools and the committee to come together to increase those opportunities. We also had minimal to no collaboration between school and agency representatives. I would often hear, I'm not sure what that agency does, or I don't know who that representative is. So that was a really important gap for me to fill. I also knew across this co-op that there were no formal assessments or standardized curriculums being used that focused solely on post-secondary transition. And just looking at all of the needs of our area and taking everything into account, the village concept and needing all the extra supports became such an important factor for us. No one person, regardless of their drive or their passion or their desire to work hard for students, can fill all of the needs for every student. So forming a village and a TPC to support that student as they make that transition from high school to adult services is such an important need. Now we're going to discuss the importance of transition planning committees. First, let's define what actual transition planning means. If we look at it, it really is planning that begins with the end in mind. Thinking about that, it takes an intentional, organized, and coordinated process to guide our students with disabilities to have exceptionally important, meaningful experiences that support and serve their needs, to help them have a meaningful life beyond high school in whatever capacity that they feel is valuable to them and to their family. Looking at the laws that support TPCs forming, we have IDEA, ESSA, and WIOA are all three laws that are federal legislation that mandate they have the collaboration between the agencies, the schools, the community organizations, and the government to work together to support students with disabilities as they move from high school to the adult services world. In looking towards our Illinois specific requirements, specifically focused on the Rehabilitation of Persons with Disabilities Act, we note that the Department of Human Services, specifically the Division of Rehab Services, shall be responsible for coordinating local TPCs. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't mean that they're the ones that are responsible for running it or facilitating the meetings or even founding the committee, but it's so important to make sure that your TPC is cooperating and collaborating with your local DRS office. Also, the committee manual tells us that we need to elect a chair, you need to meet at least quarterly, and you need to consist of representatives from various arenas. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, and you should feel free to add or take away people as you need to, but in your area, try to find people that are representatives of the special ed and voc ed and regular ed departments. I know a lot of times those regular ed people maybe get overlooked, but especially the people that can help with the life skills type classes and those things that are like independent living skills. It's really nice to have a representative on that committee from that arena. We also want to look at our local businesses and industries. We don't have a lot of those. As I mentioned earlier, we're in a rural, impoverished area. But if you can find people that are willing to partner with the committee to help with possible future job opportunities and maybe some cooperative employment opportunities, it's really important to have those people on your committee. We have some great representation from our post-secondary education in our area. The Disability Supports Office has been a huge support and really helped us get going. And one other group that's often overlooked also would be parents and youth with disabilities. So, having a student that's currently a student, or maybe more than one, on your committee to help you guys identify the gaps in services is really important. Parents are the best people to be able to tell you where they're not sure what's going on or what kind of assistance they may need or things that they don't understand. So, inviting some parents to be part of the committee is nice. It's also nice to have somebody that maybe graduated from the area and can also help you identify those gaps in services or maybe some needs that they felt like were unmet when they were in school. Having your local case coordination agencies or your PASS agencies are very important representatives. And also just any of your adult service providers, they may be a public agency or a private agency, but anyone that's going to support the student as they make that move from high school again to adult services. Let's take a deeper look into the 6 Illinois requirements for transition planning committees. First, it's really important to identify the services, programs, and funding sources in your region and community that are currently supporting students that are both secondary and post secondary age that have disabilities, as well as their families. And the reason for this is to identify the gaps in services and unmet needs so that we can develop strategies to address those needs and to fill in the gaps to assist in a more positive transition process. We also need to make sure we're forming interagency teams to address present and future transition needs of students, not just having a school based team at the students' transition IEP meetings. It's also important to develop a mission statement that focuses on the goals of integration and participation in all aspects of community life for persons with disabilities. We're not just looking at education or training or employment or independent living. It needs to look at all of the different regions and areas of a student's life. The fourth area of focus is providing a way to exchange information about the services that you've identified, any programs, and any other areas that might help a student in their movement through and beyond high school. Area 5 looks at creating training programs to help the community, including people who might interact with a student to better understand and support their needs. Finally, we're going to help train staff on how to plan for the students' transitions and how to assess what supports or services the students will need for life after high school. So, not only is interagency collaboration mandated, but there's also research, as we show on the screen, that supports the value of the TPCs. Specifically, there are 3 important things that the research tells us in terms of interagency collaboration. First, the interagency collaboration is a well structured, intentional process that encourages cooperation across agencies, programs, and disciplines, resulting in meaningful outcomes for students. Second, collaboration and coordination is a promising practice and predictor of post school success. Finally, any agency that could support or be responsible for providing transition services should be invited to transition planning meetings. When taken together, this information points to the critical importance of intentional, structured interagency collaboration in transition planning for youth with disabilities. Now that we've discussed the legal requirements, let's talk about how our area went about meeting those requirements and taking the initial steps to form a TPC. One of the biggest requirements in Illinois to be recognized is ongoing communication with the Division of Rehab Services, or DRS. They will require that your committee has an official name and an official mission statement. They do also require that you identify a fiscal agent for purposes of funding, grants, other funding sources. We opted to use our cooperative director as she obviously manages a budget and things that for her day-to-day work. And as far as the address, we use the address of the cooperative as that is our director and fiscal agent's address. Let's talk about the initial steps that we took to get our TPC started. First of all, I looked for a TPC in a similar area to ours. I wanted to find one that had been in place for many years and had an established routine, format, and member base before I went to attend their meeting. I was interested in learning about the materials that they shared and the information that they shared at their meetings, as well as what stakeholders and team members that they had present and those that maybe they felt like they were missing as well. It was important for us to determine our geographic area when we began the committee. As we serve a 3-county region in our cooperative, we opted to focus on only one county to begin, with an expansion opportunity for the following 2 counties as the committee continued to grow. In regard to committee members, it was important for me to focus on the domains in the transition IEP when we consider planning. We look at education, employment, training, and independent living. So it was important when we went to get the committee members for the TPC that we find future and current service providers for each of those domains. Next, I reached out to potential members from each domain. I talked to them about the general mission of the committee, talked about maybe some meeting dates and some times. And I was really excited with the first 25 people that I reached out to. I had no one tell me that they were not interested, and everyone was really excited about it. I found people were thirsty for more information and really, really interested in getting together to support our students in our region. Finally, I set the agenda for the initial meeting and sent out the date and the time that we had chosen. Now I'll make a quick introduction for my TPC committee members. Our Kaskaskia Region TPC, we took a fun little picture here in front of our building, and that's not our full committee, but it is several of our committee members. You'll see people in the picture from our supported employment area regional services. We have a local public transportation representative. We only have one of those in our area, so she is present. You'll see DRS, people from our public schools, our therapeutic day schools, our regional superintendent of schools is on our committee, as well as the CTE director, the disability supports advisor at our local community college, as well as our PUNS representatives, SILA representatives, and other agencies that generally participate online, like your state agencies such as ICTW or DSCC. In regard to officers for our TPC, we wanted to make sure that we were electing officers from a variety of different agencies so that the committee didn't live or die with one particular organization. First of all, we established our roles. We wanted to make sure that we had a chair and a co-chair, as well as a secretary and a co-secretary, and we always have to have a treasurer in place. We decided in our particular area that we wanted to have our chairs, co-chairs, and all of our other roles serve for 1 year, and then they alternate the following year. So I was currently the chair, then the next year my co-chair would take over. So there's always someone in experience that's available. And also then if someone's absent or unable to fulfill their role at that point, then the co-person is able to take over. So we do a lot of alternating every other year. And then when we elect the new officers, again, we try to sort out where we have different agencies represented every time. And it's not just our co-op or it's not just the DRS people, just that we have other people involved so that the committee doesn't live and die with just us. When thinking about the initial agenda for our first meeting, I wanted to make sure people didn't feel like it was a meeting that really could have been an email. So we made sure that everything was brief, but we also wanted to make sure we were providing enough information for everyone to feel welcome, be interested in the committee, and want to come back next time. We started with introductions. I knew everybody that was there because I did all of the invitations, but a lot of the people that were there were not familiar with each other. They were making a first time introduction. Maybe they talked on the phone or sent an email to each other previously, but had never met in person. So we had them introduce themselves, where they were located, how they support individuals with disabilities, because some of the local businesses or transportation sector may not have been quite as obvious as some of maybe our pass agents or our DRS. Those roles are a little bit more obvious. And we also had them talk about what gaps in services they see or what concerns that they have in regard to services in our region for those with disabilities. It's important at your initial meeting to thoughtfully plan out your short-term and long-term goals for your committee. Our initial short-term goal was planning our vision and mission statement. We spoke earlier about that as an initial requirement for recognition with the Division of Rehab Services for TPCs in Illinois. Our long-term goal is focused on creating a resource fair, a new website to share resources with our families and our agencies and students in our region. And we wanted to talk about different plans for growth for our committee and ways to expand services in our area. We set our follow-up meeting dates and made sure that we all had those on our calendar prior to leaving. And I also sent Google Calendar invites immediately following the meeting because scheduling is very difficult. We also talked about topics that we wanted to brainstorm before the next meeting, and I created a shared Google Drive that had different docs inside for brainstorming, TPC member contact information, and other areas that we might need to share information or other items prior to the next meeting. I wanted to share a few ways that I encourage member participation at our TPCs. As I travel around the state and talk to other people, I hear often that there's struggles on TPCs that have been around for a while in regard to participation. Some people have noted concerns with dwindling attendance, or they feel like they're the only person talking. So I wanted to share some ideas for how we structure our agendas for our follow up meetings to maybe encourage some more member participation and keep people active and interested. First, we always start with discussion items. This is anything that's new information to share. We may have committee reports, such as for our big fairs or big events. Any concerns that we're seeing, this could be legislative, this could just be within our building, our facility, or our agency, and any neat accomplishments that we may have had, or big wins that our agencies are had, or our individuals, students, and other professionals. We move on to our roundtable, and this is the area that really requires participation. I have each person's domain listed on the agenda each time. And they know that I'm going to call on them every time and ask them to speak about what's going on in their area. So we'll talk about independent living, we'll talk about education, we'll talk about employment, all of the different areas. And sometimes people don't have anything to share, but oftentimes they know that they're going to be asked to participate. And it's very rare that people have nothing to tell us. There's usually definitely an update there. We also talk about announcements and upcoming events. This is a lot of PD opportunities, activities, events, anything that's going on related to persons with disabilities, training, or other opportunities. And then at the bottom, we always leave our future meeting dates on the top on the bottom and our topics that we want to brainstorm prior to the next meeting. I thought it might be helpful to share our timeline and how we made progress towards having no TPC to having a very active TPC at this point. We've only been in place for a year and a half with our committee, so I wanted to give you a quick outline of how we started and how we were moving forward. We started out with me taking the time to network with our semi local TPCs. I like to attend their meetings. They're over an hour away. That's as local as our TPC region extends here. And just seeing what their members were, what materials they shared, the topics, things like that, that they were focused on, just to bring some ideas back to my area. I also brainstormed potential committee members. I came back to my office, spoke with my director and other coworkers and people in the area from the various domains to decide who we might want to invite to be part of our committee. Then I went online and talked to local experts about just different TPC informations and requirements, things that people are doing and what the research says, just so that we knew that we were forming a committee in the correct way that was going to be long-term and sustainable. After that, we moved into having our initial meeting in January with our different teams and following the agenda that I spoke about earlier. The second meeting, we took time to schedule our mission statement and establish our goals, both long term and short term. In March, we elected our officers. And again, like I spoke about earlier, with different agency representations, so that we had a committee, again, that would be long term and sustainable. The following month, we broke into committees and talked about our various long term goals and large events and how we were going to structure our committees to sponsor those. And at the end of the year, we scheduled our meetings for the following school year. As you can see, we did monthly meetings the first year, but it was only for the first half of the school year. But the following year, we opted to go to every other month. So we wanted to keep people interested and engaged, but not monopolize their time. So we decided to try it every other month schedule. And I can say now that that year has ended, that that has been successful and was appropriate for our committee. The next school year we came back, we were attending a lot of conferences. I go to both state and national conferences that focus on transition, and we share those upcoming events on our agenda. And I would often see people from my TPC at those conferences. So it was nice to have that collaborative experience together. I also host a lot of professional development here at Kaskaskia Special Ed. We work with different professionals like from ICTW and other places to bring in professional development as well. We had our new events that we scheduled with a resource fair. Job services fair was very important. It was a large event for us this spring. I scheduled some new parent training nights and some other just events for our area to support our schools and our families. We broke into committees. We initially had talked about the brochure. We decided that the website would be more accessible. So we opted not to do the brochure and went with the website. And we also had a committee for our resources fair. We did take time to submit a grant to DRS, and I will show you in a slide that's coming up the materials that we purchased with their funds. This spring that we just wrapped up, we had our parent training nights, a couple of different nights that were very well received from our families. We had our agency support people in person. We also allowed parents to have an online attending option or an in person attending option, and we're looking forward to expanding those the following school year. We had our resource fair for high school students, and we had job services, we had community employment people, we had agencies, our local community college. All of our service agencies that are represented on the TPC were present, and we did have 100% of our vendors asked to come back next year. So it was a very successful event. We also had a Welcome to the Real World event for our area eighth grade students. I feel like that's a group that's often overlooked in transition planning, even though they do fit the legal requirements for TPC and transition planning. And the Welcome to the Real World is actually an interactive budgeting event. The University of Illinois Extension Office comes and provides the materials, and our students really enjoyed that opportunity to interact with others, but also to practice some of those skills. As I mentioned earlier, it's very important to have projects and long-term goals to keep your committee members active and engaged. I've included pictures from two of our events this spring that were both very successful and well attended. One of the events was the Welcome to the Real World budgeting event for our eighth grade students. This was an interactive event that allowed them to travel between stations and practice real world financial skills. The other was the Transition Services and Job Fair. Again, it was primarily for high school students, but we did have some junior high students in attendance. We were lucky enough to have all of our area service agencies in attendance, as well as local employers, the community college, and some outside hands on demonstrations from our industrial tech fair providers at the community college. Students were able to do hands on welding and robotics activities, which were both very popular. At the follow up TPC meeting to the transition fair, we heard lots of positive outcomes, including students that had received competitive employment offers, those that had gotten registered with the PUNS agency, some had gotten registered with DRS, and others had gotten enrolled in college. So those were huge outcomes for us for our transition services and jobs fair. With our mini grant I spoke earlier about that we applied for in the fall, and it is available annually in the fall, we purchased the pre-ETS curriculum for our lending library. One of our goals of the TPC was to have lots of materials available to all of the districts in our co-op through our lending library. The pre-ETS curriculum was one way that we made a step towards having standardized curriculum across our co-op and available to our students in our schools. We also bought the table runner, the table banner, and the tablecloth. And those things are all just used for our different events. I take them to career fairs that I go to at the local college or local high schools and other events in the area, just so we have some advertising material so that people will come and meet with us and learn more about our organization, because we are still a very new organization. In regard to our future goals, because again, expansion is super important to keep your committee active and growing, we looked at three different areas and identified ways to continue to move forward in our region. First of all, again, was geographic expansion. We started with one county. So to look forward, we want to look into the other two counties that are part of our cooperative region to see if we can get them invited and involved, where they may start either their own TPC in their area, their county, or maybe they just join ours and bring in other members from their county. We also talked to different members to see if they have other organizations and other ideas for people in our region that could be part of our TPC. We've actually got 3 new members for next school year that we've already identified and have asked to join us. Committees, we want to look into just the different gaps that we're seeing. We've got a lot of work done already and put in towards identifying the gaps, but we also want to work on making sure we're making progress towards filling those. Looking at other stakeholders that we maybe haven't invited, including parents and students, also those regional and statewide agencies that might be part of our committees or part of our group, and how we can make it stronger and more of a viable group of people. We also want to look at our scope and our project expansion. Again, it's super important to identify those gaps and needs and how we can make ways to serve those. And one big way to do that is with talking with your stakeholders. We can't all know everything. We don't have the perspective that everybody else has. So it's nice to invite and invest with a lot of different stakeholders so that you get their input. Expanding those events for students and families is very important to us and one of our priorities. We also want to look into other funding sources so that we can make our events larger and even wider in scope and region and service. And we also want to look into advertisement. How can we better advertise our services so people are more aware of us? I would like to wrap up today by leaving you with some key considerations as you move forward in planning for your TPC. Remember, it's important to have a village to support you and your students. Finding key stakeholders to help identify gaps and fill those needs is very important. Part of that process is leveraging your social capital. Who do you know? Who can help you? Who can help them? And who do they know? Is all very important ways to figure out how to create and expand your village to support your students. It's important to look for statewide experts at various agencies that can support your mission and your vision and help you do it in an appropriate manner. Finding semi local experts or other TPCs that you can communicate with and that will support you in moving forward is important. Networking is hugely important. Finding those people that are going to be able to help you set up the committee, figure out what you need to do, because what is important in one region may not be important in another. So it's important to talk with your local stakeholders, not just the TPCs, to figure out what is important for the area. It's important to be bold, which is hard sometimes, but to invite that wide range of potential committee members. Keep in mind, nobody told me no originally, which I was kind of surprised about when I sent out that initial request to join. Try not to get overwhelmed. It's difficult sometimes. A lot of the committees that you look at may have been around for 20 plus years and you're just getting started. So sometimes being the guy that's the beginner is a little bit overwhelming, but there's nothing wrong with that. We all have to start somewhere. And as soon as you get started is the sooner that you can start serving your students. It's important to attend conferences that focus on transition. You'll start to make some connections and make that social capital and make things that are going to be important long term for both your TPC and your students, because you're learning about different agencies and organizations that exist outside of your region that can support you in your mission. I think online invites, reminders, and meeting options are important. I know some TPCs opt to not have online meetings, but that's how we get some of our statewide experts to attend. It's also how we are able to get other organizations and parents, or just people that got hung up in their building or whatever and are not able to get out. If they're able to attend online, we do have better attendance. And it's super important to value your team and your committee, but you also need to look for expansion. If you're not expanding, you're eventually going to die out. And we're seeing that with a lot of TPCs right now in the state. So it's super important to make sure your team and your committee feel like they're valued, and just making sure that you're getting all of their input and trying to figure out how you're going to move forward as a team. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.